For the past year or two, I want to say, in American politics, there's been this fascinating phenomena that I have noticed that drives me completely insane, and I want to talk about it now because I am a political junkie. Though my channel is not political, to change. I could start getting political if I like doing this, but though my channel isn't political, I am a political junkie. And this particular thing drives me nuts. So I'm going to use the ever reliable tool of MS Paint to explain to you uh, one of the most frustrating things about modern day American politics to me. And this has to do with conservatives believing that they are the helpless victims who are trying to tell the truth in a world or in a country of left wing bias and falsehoods and conspiracy theories, and they're the ones who are the innocent truth tellers. And there's a reason, very clear reason, why this is complete bullshit. And I want to explain why. So, if we take America's political spectrum, so to speak, so theoretically, here's what we have. So you have the left and you have the right. Now, in a proper world, and in what we should imagine American politics to be, your Democrats would be somewhere over here. They're going to be at least left of center. You know, center's like purples. They're going to at least be to the left of that, and Republicans are going to be at least to the right of center. And then there's going to be, there's going to be a small area, even though it's going to be a big circle. There are areas where they can potentially come to a compromise. That's not how American politics works. Here's what the reality of our politics is. Okay? So Republicans are something like this. They are far right to the point that they go off of the spectrum a little bit. This is where they are, okay? And I will get into why later. And then Democrats, and we're talking strictly about the elected officials here who are Democrats and who are Republicans. So elected Democrats are something like this. So you can see now that there is this pretty huge crossover between the two circles of agreement. And that agreement is far right. This over here, beyond the spectrum, is extremist, and this here is far right. Now, this small sliver right here is where Democrats are the furthest left. And they are only at this point on the spectrum when it comes to social issues, okay? So, what this little fraction of the blue represents is they don't hate gays and they don't hate black people. That's essentially what the difference between Democratic Party and Republican Party is at this point in American politics, is solely that. When it comes to economics, which is what this purple is, this purple represents the fact that Republicans and Democrats agree almost completely on economic issues, okay? So when we look at the candidate for president, that is the furthest left, okay? So in American politics, we're going to say Bernie. We're just going to put Bernie, because that's his name. Bernie. In American politics, Bernie Sanders is looked at as far left because he is so extremely to the left of all of this here. He is way over here. But to the rest of the world, we're going to do a second diagram down here. Okay, to the rest of the developed world, down here, here's about where Bernie sits. Bernie, to the rest of the world, is something more like a centrist. That's a great B. This is all Bernie is. Okay. To the rest of the world, Bernie is nothing more than a centrist. And when I say the rest of the world, we mean the developed world, okay? So Bernie is like the dead center of a country like Denmark, okay? Denmark is the epitome, I would say, of the policies that Bernie supports. Denmark is most equivalent, okay? So most of the world has policies that are in line with Denmark. Most of the world has policies that are in line with of what Bernie advocates for in America. But because our politics are so far right, Bernie is looked at as far left. So how does this connect to the bigger point that conservatives are full of shit when they say that this country is, out to get them? Well, this shows to you that almost every, like an overwhelming majority of every elected official is on conservative side when it comes to just about every issue. Okay, especially on economics. They are all on your side. They are all on the side of the spectrum that you want them to be on. Now, the other thing that has a little bit more weight that conservatives love to say is that the media has a left-wing bias. This is a bit of a strange phenomenon to me as well, just in its own right, because uh, of all the major news stations, the one that is the most popular is Fox News, which is the right wing mainstream media outlet. It is more popular than CNN or MSNBC. It gets more viewership. Now, yes, it's true that there are a lot of journalist organizations that are, you know, on par with like what Bernie would say. I would say a couple of these are Vox and Huffington Post. I like both of these sources because they are on par with what I believe in. But a lot of these quote unquote left wing sources that conservatives like to go on about, they really are just in line with 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 this. They're as far left as this small sliver right here. So we're talking about like the Washington Post. The Washington Post is looked at as a left-wing media source by conservatives and even by like the website Media Bias Fact Check. They have them ranked as left-wing biased. But that is hardly true. Washington Post in 2016 attacked Bernie dozens of times, over a dozen times in 24 hours. The Washington Post completely despises of everything Bernie Sanders supports. And if Bernie is a centrist to the rest of the world, and the Washington Post is against what Bernie believes in, then the Washington Post, which conservatives see as a left-wing media source, is actually to the right of the center. That is the extent of left-wing bias in this country. Left-wing bias in America is right of center. You know what? I was on a great rant and I screwed myself up. The left-wing media sources of America are to the right of center to the rest of the world at worst, and at best, they are center. There is hardly any actual far left media sources in America. There are hardly any. There are a few, and we don't know the names of them because they're irrelevant. The potential conversation of actual far leftism, Marxism, socialism, communism, anarchism, those sorts of ideologies, they are not even in the discussion. There are people who hold such beliefs, but they aren't in the discussion, not in the mainstream discussion at all. So the extent of which our politics in the mainstream is actually left is centrist to the rest of the world. So conservatives have it very easy because the people who are their biggest opponents, supposedly, actually agree with them on an overwhelming majority of issues. There are very few people in this country, and especially very few elected officials in this country, who actually disagree with conservatives on most things.